And I'm hoping that Peter can see me. Can you hear me too, Peter?
I can, and can you hear me?
I can hear and see you. So yay! All right, we're in a good place now. All right.
Yay.
So I think everyone else can see and hear us now too. All right, so we're good. So yes, I'm Nanette King. I'm a member of the LGBA board. I'm also a proud member of the Atlanta Freedom Band. And today we're going to be talking with Peter Nolan, who has some very current information, and as well as a storied career as an instrumentalist and an educator. So, and I'm going to go ahead and pitch to Peter and let him get started.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining this. It's an honor to be part of Tootie, our online version of what's building up as a great conference. Um, we'll move to a video of a presentation that was submitted several weeks ago, um, and there has been some more current updates since that video was submitted, one of which I'll reference in the question and answer and provide a link to. A little bit of more research has come out than what's referenced, but it discusses a whole lot of scenarios that I hope will cover um, elements that will help any of the bands in our organization that have to figure out how we might operate when we get that opportunity again, whenever that is. For some of us, not right now for sure. Some of you may be moving forward. I'd say let's just bump to the presentation and leave plenty of time for questions. Hello. Today I'm here to discuss how we all might move back to more normal operations while accomplishing two very important things. Number one, safety for all of our constituents. And number two, exciting and engaging playing projects for our members. How might we resume music making under a moderate social distancing protocol, such as California Stage 3, which we hope to get to sometime soon? We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to seek and grab opportunity. And we're going to have to expect to work hard. This is not going to be easy. So, what I want to try to accomplish today is to look at some of the challenges we're going to face and some of the opportunities that I think we can find in this situation, and suggest some planning structures to help us to surmount the obstacles and seize the opportunities. Now, I'll tell you now that you don't really need to worry about taking notes or anything, because all of the links and all of the documents that I'll be showing are available in a file, the link to which you will receive. So I have a recommended planning approach that I want to tell you. I work with 5 organizations, all of which are dealing with this right now, and I consult with a couple others. So I have recommend this approach to planning for this upcoming time. A flexible tiered planning approach that would address 3 scenarios. You will maybe have to adjust these for your locale and organization, but I think we should be thinking that we might have a time when we're allowed to gather in groups of 50. Now, this would also depend on our venues and whether we can fit 50 in with spacing, which we'll get to. Another scenario would allow us to have gatherings of maybe about 30 people. And finally, the most restrictive we're really going to dig into is gatherings of 10 people. Now, the reason that's the most restrictive we're going to deal with is that many of us are living right now through the more restrictive scenario. And I will discuss a little bit how we can flexibly move back to this lockdown scenario if we had to. So one of the things we're going to have to be very both flexible and creative about is how what's our endpoint? And I want to look at the endpoint first. Where are we going to get to? What are our culminating events? And then we can work backwards. Some possibilities are streamed or recorded concerts, outdoor concerts. I think in many of our locations, outdoor concerts may become possible a fair bit before indoor concerts do. Live layered recordings in small group sessions provide, I think, a real opportunity. It's one that with my university and youth band, I'm really planning towards as a substantial option, because with those organizations, I have the resources, and it's engendered quite a bit of excitement from those players. The idea of coming in and essentially doing professional quality recording sessions, having that recording session experience. And virtual recording projects, the type of which we have been doing, many of us, for the last couple of months, but at which we're getting better and better, and which maybe we can find ways to continue to even make them better and better. What are some of the things we're likely to be required to do in order to start having in-person meetings again, which is, I think, what we all crave? We're going to have sanitation everywhere, both for people and for stuff. We're going to have to ensure that people get in and out of our venues without inadvertent contact. That might involve a door monitor at some venues, or separate doors for entrance and exit. If you think about how the grocery stores are handling things, we're going to have to do some of the same things. We're going to need some sort of way of encouraging people not to come to rehearsal if they are not well. A wellness check, or perhaps even temperature checks. I think we're going to need to have shorter rehearsals so that we don't need a break, which is a time of congregating. We may need to provide or require that we have instrument sanitizer spray around. We may all have to bring our own stands so that we don't have to clean them. We will have to deal with brass condensation. We already talked a little bit about we'll have to have alternative concert culminating outcomes for our music making. And one of the big ones that we're going to talk about substantially today is we're going to have to figure out player social distancing in rehearsal and performance. So in some locations, for some venues, we may be required to have a detailed health and safety plan, and it may be a good idea for all of us. What are some of the pieces of information that might be required? We're going to need to know the responsibilities of the various participants in our activity. What are our protective measures and our site sanitation measures? And what's our plan if someone actually is exposed to or comes down with the virus? Fortunately, there are, and I think will be, better and better templates for plans like this that help deal with a lot of these issues so that we don't have to each figure them out separately. This is an example of a template from a construction consortium, and it's a couple months old. I think there will be much better available as we go forward, and probably specific to our activities. But you can see it's got some boilerplate on the front, and then we get some of the information that we need to provide. What are our responsibilities? What are our practices, etc.? So these templates could be very valuable, and all of them will be included in the link that you can access. As I said, we'll, before rehearsals, need to know that our players are not likely sick. So we may need a screening of some sort, or, as I said, perhaps a temperature check. This is a sample of a screening that we use for one of the camps that I run. We'll need probably some sort of checklist for safety for our employees and volunteers in our case. A lot of times we're going to have to adapt, and when people call employees, we're going to have to think volunteers, participants, etc. But here's one that could be adapted for our use potentially. And we're likely to need some checklists for our sites, for our venues, to make sure that we're doing all the things that will help us all stay healthy. This is quite a valuable resource for all of us, specifically pertaining to events, the Event Safety Alliance, their reopening guide. It's 30 pages packed with valuable information. There's the link where you can get it. It also is included in the documents packet for today's presentation. So we're going to have a very important question to answer for each of our organizations. Who is responsible for managing the protocols? It's a very important question. Is it a staff member? Maybe a production coordinator? Or maybe a task force? That's the option that I would recommend. I don't think it's probably a fair burden for any individual or even a couple of people. And what do you do if they get sick? So I think the formation of a task force or team to deal with and respond to this pandemic is likely the best plan for most organizations. So we've got a new question. Let's talk about WIN players and social distancing. There is some concern about aerosol dissemination being part of playing a wind instrument. And there's some research going on mainly in Europe. The early results are not showing that it's particularly high in dissemination of aerosols and therefore dispersal of the virus. But the results are definitely still being analyzed. This is an article about some research at the Freiburg Institute of Music Medicine, which was done in conjunction with the Bamberg Symphony. And they are providing updates every week or two. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to get the most recent update translated yet. But I'm sure it's going to be a valuable source of information. These two videos synopsize that Bamberg research and some research currently going on in Vienna.
Also 1000 Volt, Millivolt, dann haben wir erst einmal eine Geschwindigkeit von Beim Pusten oder Husten wich der Nebel weg und hat sich zum Teil sehr diffus und sehr weit verbreitet, während beim Blasvorgang eigentlich diese Nebelwand oder um den Instrumentalisten herum ziemlich stabil geblieben ist, ohne große Ausbreitung.
Hoffentlich mache ich jetzt nicht alles. Nein, Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass es gering wird.
The Vienna Philharmonic recently commissioned a study to determine how far, if at all, air was projected from a brass or woodwind instrument while playing. The result of the study showed that there was little to no air being projected beyond a couple of feet, which is about the same as simple speech, and that playing brass and woodwind instruments was actually quite safe. We expanded on that study to show several different instruments playing at a high volume directly into a suspended tissue from a distance of approximately 1 foot. It was interesting to note that when the player gently blew air without the instrument, the tissue moved a lot. However, regardless of volume or instrument type, the tissue did not move when an instrument was actually being played. The kinetic energy of the moving air is being transferred into vibrations, which is what creates the sound.
The oscillation of the diaphragm will also cause the air in front of the diaphragm to move back and forth. But here's the interesting thing. The air in front of the diaphragm doesn't actually travel away from the speaker. The air molecules in front of the speaker just oscillate back and forth. So how can you hear the sound from a speaker if the air next to the speaker doesn't actually make it to your ear? Well, the reason is that the oscillating air in front of the speaker causes the air in front of it to also oscillate, until finally the air that's actually next to your ear and your eardrum start to oscillate back and forth.
The Berlin Philharmonic came back a few weeks ago with 5 meters between their wind players. That was very early, and this research wasn't done. Concerts in Austria are resuming with 1 meter, and they're like this week they are starting back. Our hope is that based on this research and some research also going on at the University of Colorado, we'll get some very clear, scientifically based recommendations and guidelines. Some such guidelines are already forthcoming. The High School Band Directors Association, in a document that just came out, recommended 10 feet of spacing, and the use of outdoor or large high-ceilinged rehearsal venues. They, for instance, suggested that they pursue holding their rehearsals in someplace like the cafeteria or the gymnasium. U.S. Army bands recently came out with some very clear guidance and procedures. Conductors and teachers are in a vulnerable position because of the number of contacts made in a week, might be dozens or hundreds. Given this, my plan is to probably use a plastic mask of the sort we see on the left, and to use some personal amplification of the sort we see on the right. Now, I've decided, I think that the personal amplification is the way to go for amplification, which will be necessary given the wide spread of people, the wearing of the mask, etc. I've decided that personal amplification is the way to go, so because it means there's no need to store it, for someone to move it, for more than one person to ever handle it. So I think it's a very good way to go. So let's look at social distancing of players. I've been creating diagrams for social distancing requirements of about 6 feet, 9 feet, and 15 feet. In each case, I add a little bit to that to allow for us moving our heads as we play. So to make the 6 foot, I plan for 8 foot. And an 8 foot diameter circle is 50.2 square feet. As you see, 10 foot to allow the 9 foot distancing is 78. And a 16 foot diameter circle is 201. All of these options take up substantially more space than we're used to in rehearsal and put us in a different situation where we are, of course, much more spread out. We'll look at some of the challenges and potential advantages of that later, looking into specifics and diagrams. One thing we need to note is that staggering rows makes a big difference. You can see right here that the length of the line and the size of the circle do not change, but the distance of the chairs, just for staggering the rows, gets really greater. And then if we add to that a little bit of widening of the rows, we achieve a pretty large gain. So I have modeled a number of different sized ensembles with a number of different sized spacings. Here we see a 41 piece ensemble with 8 foot spacing. So each of those circles would have a player in the middle. Some of you might be concerned that the players on the edge, their space is cut in half, but on that side, they would not need social distancing as there wouldn't be another person over there. It would just be a wall or something like that. And so we see here that with 41 players for this sized spacing, we need a depth of 34 feet and a width of 70 feet. So a little over 2,100 square feet. We cut that down to about a 30 piece ensemble, still with this 8 foot circles allowing a solid 6 foot distancing. we get it down to 26 feet by 66 feet for about a 1,700 square foot footprint. Reducing it down to 16 players, potentially a brass choir kind of a group, large wind serenade. We're looking at something more like 20 by 50, so 1,000 square feet. Sorry about the move to the end. This is about some specifics of our rehearsal room in San Francisco is the reason that I moved these. So these are now 10-foot spacings. And we see a brass ensemble of 16 people needing pretty substantially more space. It's 1,600 square feet roughly. If we get up to the 16-foot mark, we're back to that like 3,000 square foot range for a 16-piece group. So we kind of hope we don't have to do 5 meters. But if we do, here's one way to do it. So the question definitely has come up. Can we wear a mask and play? And this is being explored. I've seen some European players actually using masks. I found this one available that might be able to do it, but I said we have to be creative. I think this is one of the more creative applications that I have seen. This is a private student of mine from New York, and though she's a mother of girls, she still had the idea to go and buy, she wants to make sure everybody knows she bought some brand new boys' underwear to make this mask. That's being creative. So, this whole increased spacing thing, it's tough, but it's not unprecedented. As wind and percussion players, many of us have marched and experienced this. There may even be some advantages. Maybe players will hear themselves better and not play so loud. Some of my players know that I would like that. Maybe players will be able to hear different parts of the ensemble than they have always been able to hear when they're in their same spot with the same person next to them. And maybe it won't be so loud on my ears either. So this group is pretty widely spaced. Probably more in the meter and a half range, but some of them much more. And these are very young players. These are actually elementary school players, and they don't have a problem with it. There'll be some challenges, but it's far from unprecedented, and it's something we can do, and we may find things we really like about. So moving on into a new topic, planning for success. So in this section, what I would like to do is to look at some kind of general plans for each of those scenarios, 10 people, 30 people, 50 people, and how they could flow from one to the other so that we maintain flexibility, and then go into a few specific ways that I've been considering applying them to our band in San Francisco. So in order to plan for success, we're going to need a few things. As stated, we're going to need creativity, always going to require flexibility in this time, and we're going to need time. So starting to look at scenarios. First, gatherings of 10 people. I call it Plan C, because it's our most restrictive, probably least desired status to be in. We could do chamber ensembles, culminating in a streaming or recorded concert. It could include the wonderful wind divertimenti serenades, dectets. Here's some composers that come to mind. perhaps brass ensemble, percussion ensemble, saxophone ensemble. Some groups we might need a flute ensemble in order to cover everyone, or a clarinet ensemble. There's of course a ton of original and arranged repertoire for these. And here's a couple of good sources where I list these sources because the information is very well organized for you to find various instrumentations that you might need. And these links are in the packet. We might also include some of the very famous and well-known mixed chamber ensembles, meaning mixed wind, brass, percussion, but chamber of Persichetti, Hindemith, and others. Another option with 10 people, full band repertoire with online or small group, fewer than 10, preparation, culminating in potentially an in-person studio recording experience. Also can be accomplished in small groups, or if the scenario changes, maybe it can be accomplished in larger groups. As I say, this has been proven to be a very popular option for some of my college and youth players. So these recordings would be similar in format to the internet recordings we've been doing, but they would culminate in in-person professional quality, if we can find that, recording sessions. Some of the ways we can look at preparing online in small groups, I found it very effective to have performers, before we do internet recordings, submit a recording to me, and then I email them back feedback. There are some other options that I'll include later, but that's one that's worked really well for me. I have done also online sectionals where different people played and discussed, and the players just compared fingerings, and we matched up trill speeds and stuff like that in just a Zoom sectional. So I like this plan because it's very flexible. It can slide up to the larger sizes very easily, and they can slide back to this. So this has become kind of my favorite, and you'll see it carries through all three scenarios. It does require substantial resources, financial for recording sessions and planning. So that is an issue that we would all have to have figured out. If, as you're in this process, the situation improves, you might be able to replace the recording process with a streamed, recorded, or maybe even a nice outdoor concert. So some of the advantages of that plan: it's flexible. It can move to in-person rehearsals and performance. Because we're playing large group repertoire, we'll just rehearse however many people we can rehearse at a time. We have lots of repertoire available. It's a great vehicle for individual player feedback and improvement. I think it could actually result in a higher level of detail attention for players that could actually strengthen our ensembles when we come back to live rehearsals and performances. And I think, particularly the recording option is very exciting for performers. What are a couple of the caveats of this plan? Repertoire does have to be very carefully chosen, knowing that we may record it or may perform it. It's intensive for the staff to deliver feedback on recordings. I did every other week so that I did half of my group. And it's intensive regarding logistics and could be expensive for recording, depending on what resources are available. So when we're allowed to have 30 people or so, we have some different options. Some smaller bands may be able to resume their regular rehearsals. I know in Ligbo we have some bands in the 20-some and 30-ish size range. Larger bands will have to figure out a way to rotate rehearsals. There's a couple of options for how to set that up. We could split rehearsals, but do large band repertoire where everyone is playing the same repertoire, but we're just rehearsing however many people we're allowed to at a given moment. What's our culmination? Could be recording, could be outdoor concert, could be streamed concert, etc. Second option is we could split the ensemble into separate smaller ensembles, like the chamber option that we listed above, but it could include larger chamber works and maybe wind ensemble works. And here again are some resources for repertoire for that kind of larger chamber wind to small band type of repertoire, if that's something you're looking for. And all of those are included in the packet that's available. When we get to gatherings of 50 or more, lots of possibilities open up. Small and medium bands will possibly be able to resume regular rehearsal if their venue will accommodate them with spacing, whatever is required. Larger than bands will still have to rotate. And there's a couple of possibilities. Again, one is having everybody play the same repertoire and just rehearsing the number that we're allowed to rehearse at any given time. To be done in sectionals, or just these 50 players come, and the next week these 50 players come. But that would be it's a lot of planning, right? But it's got an advantage of flexibility. It can flow up the chart if we go back to the 30 people being restricted, being the level, then we could just use fewer players. If it goes up to 10, we could start to do online preparation, looking towards recording. So it's a very flexible plan. Second example would be splitting the ensemble into separate ensembles and performing smaller band repertoire, something in, say, the 40 range. And I haven't bothered to provide a lot of repertoire because that would be mostly the repertoire that we're doing anyway, I think, just with fewer players. Again, that has some advantages and some disadvantages. So that's what planning is for. So in this planning for success segment, I now want to just spend a few minutes showing how I've been kind of mulling these issues for our band in San Francisco, the San Francisco Lesbian Gay Freedom Band. We have some interesting rehearsal and scheduling parameters. If I could get the players all into just 4 groups, say in those middle, the 30 and 50, then everybody could get to rehearse 1 hour every other week. But for us, that's not ideal because some players drive way more than 1 hour to get to rehearsal. So we would have a lot of considering to do about how we organize our rehearsals. And we might even have to have more than 4 ensembles, in which case we might not even see everybody every other week if we use only our one venue. We might need multiple venues. Some players would be needed in more than one ensemble, but I don't think anybody's going to mind that too much. Our venue may not be the ideal place. I need to know more about the ventilation, but I think a larger, more open and well-ventilated space would be better. One thing for us to here's one of those opportunities. In this time, venues that would not normally have been available, maybe. So we need to think outside of our normal box. I hate to bring up the think outside the box thing one more time, but we're gonna have to just think, so where might we be able to hold a rehearsal that would never have been available to us 4 months ago, but might in the current climate? In our case, changing venue would potentially mean that we need to select repertoire that only uses certain percussion equipment, because we would not be able to transport some equipment to certain venues. Now, I'd like to just go through a little bit about how I'm applying this 3-part planning to San Francisco. We are the official band of the city and county of San Francisco. And as such, and given some flexibilities that we have as a concert band and as a community ensemble, we would like to be at the forefront as far as bringing performance back to our area. All the while, of course, making the primary value to maintain the safety of our members and other constituents. So the scenarios, again, that we have to plan for are that we'll be all online as we are right now, and as we anticipate starting this process. That then very small groups will probably be allowed to meet, then maybe medium groups will be allowed, and then larger groups. And we want to be able to move fluidly in both directions through this. So in order to accomplish this, I've considered things like the chamber music plans and stuff like that, but I've arrived at this as my current favorite. That we would pick some music that we can perform all of us together or in smaller groups of, say, 30 to 35 players, and that we would distribute the music and make part assignments now, and then really soon start doing online rehearsals using the techniques that we've discussed, submitted recordings by players and by sections, maybe some online sectionals to work on details, things like that. And then when possible, we would move to in-person rehearsals. So we may find it's a good season for us, of course, so we may start outdoors. That may become possible first, and we will meet with whatever is the allowable and possible number of players at each rehearsal, and hopefully be able to get back to some in-person rehearsal. So those we can move back and forth through. If we have to then move back to smaller groups or back to online, we can do that. So our goal for this is, in the really beautiful season in San Francisco, September and October, called San Francisco Summer, that we might be able to produce multiple outdoor concerts in various venues throughout the city with reduced bands. So I don't expect that we can put all 70 or 80 of us in one place, but maybe we can do 30 to 35. Something, we rotate personnel with something like this as an instrumentation for each performance, more if it can be done in a certain venue. Again, we need that flexibility. So if we have to, we can go to the in-person studio recording model, or online recording if we have to. And ideally, if we could get to it, if everything were to just suddenly get better, maybe we can all do one grand full concert with all of us together. But again, this is fluid. We can move both directions. We will need to develop plans for reaching our most at-risk members who will not be able to attend rehearsal. This may involve having online components even once we begin meeting in person. So one idea I had that I was, just in the last day or so, that I was pretty happy about was the idea of the a cappella app sectional or chamber rehearsal, depending on what direction we've gone. We're in a highly restrictive environment. Perhaps we could use the a cappella app, which is the app where one person plays, passes it along, somebody else plays with them. Perhaps the section leader is the first person to record and passes it on to other players in the section. Then eventually it comes back to the section leader, who maybe listens and gives some feedback and submits to the AD for feedback. So this is a way of actually having sectional feedback, even as far as comparing note lengths, comparing articulations, working on intonation before we can actually assemble. I was pretty proud of that. So, synopsizing. We have to get creative because we all want to get back to these. And we will. This is where we want to get. This is where we will get. But in the interim, there are some really exciting possibilities, some great opportunities of these sorts. So thank you for sharing this time with me. And I look forward to us now getting to discuss this issue further. Thanks so much. Greetings, everyone. Nanette, am I where I need to be?
Let's see.
Uh-oh. Hi, I'm not hearing you, Nanette. Are you there? Okay.
Okay,
There.
there you go. Can you hear me now? All
Now I
right.
got you. I got
Okay.
you.
All right. Cool. All right. So yeah, there was some actually really good Q&A that came out of this. So interestingly, a lot of you were interested in some similar topics. So we're just going to take them, I guess, using that as how we prioritize. And so the first one that I see, Peter, is says you may cover this later, but would a waiver for members attending rehearsal be necessary to safeguard the band as an organization?
I've been confronting that with several of my organizations, and one of my organizations is run by lawyers. The entire board happens to be very high-powered attorneys, and they are planning on using something because insurance doesn't cover it. But the thing that they all say is that it would be very hard unless you become an entire outbreak to say, well, that's where I caught it, and to assign liability. But I think it is a very wise thing, and I think we'll see templates for that if they aren't already out there. I would recommend it.
Okay, great. This is a quick one. It says, thank you for this presentation and the handouts. It is excellent. Is there a way for us to view this presentation again? And I guess that's actually one that we can work out with the administrative piece here to get that information to everyone. So we'll follow up on that for you.
Well, and I will say, I'm glad to share the kind of modeling of spacing slides as slides so that people could move them around for their group if we can figure out a way to do that as their keynote slides.
Okay, gotcha. So everybody hit up Peter. Okay, and this is an interesting one. It says, I realize that safely playing together is a real possibility, but what's the use if we cannot fill the audience?
Well, my view towards this with the groups that I run, which are educational and community, is that really I consider less than half of our mandate or our mission to be performing for people, and half of it to be, or more, to be playing together, developing community, and developing our players. And so I focused for this very restrictive time on that side of it, and we're using the recording element and potentially online streaming concerts as a way to reach our audience. And we've been doing this pretty successfully in San Francisco. We've had 4 shelter-in-place recordings released so far, and we're embarking on the next 3. We've pretty much had to abandon the outdoor concerts in September because California has gone backwards. So we've had to go up to a more restrictive plan. And we're pretty much planned on mostly online for the rest of the year at this point.
Let's see, it says, for those of us who are in bands that rehearse at a university, which may have their own pandemic restrictions, is it incumbent upon the band to sell a COVID-19 safety plan to convince the university to allow events?
I think that will likely be the case, and also school districts. In fact, some very valuable information for this presentation came from my youth orchestra organization, which performs in schools in the South Bay. Rehearses in schools in the South Bay, and in partnership with our people there, they were telling us what we would need. So some of those planning documents are direct response to requests from school districts.
All right. Okay, and this is a question actually about flute and piccolo players. It says, clearly the studies shown have other instruments. Any chance we'll ever get to join in person? I guess the flute picks.
Yeah, I just added a link to the National Institute of Health. The study has just this week published preliminary results. And interestingly, they aren't calling for additional spacing with flutists, but they are with trombonists. I found that kind of funny. On bonus, they recommend 9 feet in front and 6 feet to the side. A couple of things that alter from what I put. They also recommend straight rows for certain airflow reasons. This is a real droplet study. It's like micro droplets, studying how they move, and it's very valuable. It's in the chat, and it's actually, the link is in the link sheet. It's just that the preliminary studies have come out, and you can find those at the link for the NIH studies.
Okay. All right. Are entering and leaving taken into consideration when spacing is set up? Spacing must be maintained even when folks are in motion.
Yeah, it's actually probably more a part of the entry and exit plan than the spacing itself, in that you need to have people load in order. So either to the far side of the room from the entrance, or to the middle of the room if there's multiple entrances. And that does need to be managed. One of the things in the preliminary studies that they are very, very adamant about is having every player have a mask. They recommend masks when playing on the instruments that can be done, but they really want the mask in place so that nobody talks. So mask up before you talk, mask it up all the way in. It seems from reading the study, they're almost more worried about the talking than the playing. So I think for the entry and exit masks and order of loading the room are the
Okay. All right. And this might be covered in the information. The new information was actually regarding flutes again. And would they need more space in front and to the right side?
I kind of assumed they would. The Vienna study really indicated that it wasn't a substantial push of air. And that kind of surprised me. And I will say that in the new study, I did not see that, but I think it's a wise thing to think towards giving some extra space, since the flute does not get channeled into the chamber of an instrument that slows the air down. It blows right into the ether. So I think it's a good idea, but I'm not necessarily seeing recommendations for it yet.
Okay. All right. And we're about at wrap time. So I'm hoping that if people have additional questions, that as we kind of virtually gather over the next couple of days, they'll be able to reach out, and we're happy to put people in touch as well. But I want to thank you, Peter. This was great information. I know that it's a very dynamic thing right now. It's changing, and so I appreciate you keeping the information current.
I'm really glad to have had this opportunity. Thanks for tuning in, and it changes moment to moment and location to location. So I hope the links and the documents are very helpful. I think that's probably as valuable as anything you're getting from today.
All right. Well, thanks all, and enjoy your next sessions, and we'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Nanette. Thank you, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.